Nick Reiner was supposed to be arraigned yesterday. However, his high profile attorney, Alan Jackson, stunned everyone and dropped out of the case. Nick is now being represented by a public defender. Plus, TMZ is dropping a new report this week that gives some insight into why Nick's medications were changed just the month prior to the murders, as well as a new update on his diagnosis. Let's get into it. All right, I want to start out with this first quick update. So now Nick has been removed from the suicide watch, which I talked about in my previous video, what that would take to get him put on suicide watch. We talked about the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, the CSSRS, and there's 6 points on that scale. So you would have to rate at least a 3 out of those 6 to indicate a higher risk. So most likely now that he's been taken off, he has cleared that assessment, most likely scoring a 0. Nick Reiner speaks in court in new video amid reports he was on verge of tears. Nick Reiner was not arraigned on Wednesday in the double murder of his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, after his attorney, Alan Jackson, asked to withdraw from the case. Nick was present in court for the hearing as his new public defender asked to push the arraignment to February 23rd. The judge asked Nick if he agreed to have his arraignment postponed. In video from inside the courtroom, Nick can be heard agreeing to the postponement. So I want to start out here with this short clip of his attorney withdrawing from the case or from representing Nick. And after that, we're going to get into Peter from The Lawyer You Know, who obviously is a lawyer, so he has more background into explaining possible reasonings as to the cause of the withdrawal.
Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
That was Alan Jackson's emphatic statement just minutes after announcing his decision in open court.
With Mr. Reiner's understanding and consent, we're asked to withdraw his counsel of record. We feel that we have no choice at this juncture but to withdraw his counsel and has to be relieved.
Jackson, who has repped stars like Kevin Spacey and won an acquittal in the sensational Karen Reed trial.
Not guilty.
Stepping aside from the Reiner case, speaking out after making the shocking announcement.
I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. We know that the legal process will reveal the true facts of the circumstances surrounding this case.
The only time we heard from Nick himself was when the judge appointed a public defender in Alan's place.
Do you waive your right to be arraigned today so that your matter may be continued to February 23rd, 2026 for arraignment?
Yeah. In the few words that he said, he seemed coherent to me. He seemed to really take in the crowded room.
Our special correspondent, Melissa McCarty, was inside the courtroom as the drama unfolded. You got a good look at him. Can you tell me what you saw?
I did. So Nick Reiner was wearing a brown jumpsuit. He was not wearing that suicide vest that he had on last time. And then a few times throughout the about 30-minute proceeding, he looked around the room. He was engaging with his attorney, smiling.
To your knowledge, was there anyone from the Reiner family that was in court today?
To my knowledge, there was not.
Today, the New York Times reports a source as saying Alan's departure had nothing to do with his performance. The Reiner family told the paper they have the utmost trust in the legal process and will not comment further.
Alan, who's paying for Nick's defense?
Alan wasn't answering our questions in the crush of cameras as he arrived to court.
How's Nick doing right now?
People magazine reports Nick was removed from suicide watch before today's hearing, but video cameras were not allowed to photograph Nick. So why the secrecy surrounding Nick's appearance? ABC News legal analyst Brian Buckmeyer.
This likely determination by the judge to not try to taint any possible future proceedings.
Still a mystery? Nick's actions in the hours and days before the grisly double murder. The New York Post obtaining this video of Nick calmly walking down the street near his parents' home after he reportedly got into a blowout argument at a Christmas party. Authorities had already shared these pictures of the moment Nick was taken into custody by the LAPD Gang and Narcotics Division with the help of the U.S. Marshals. TMZ reports he will eventually plead not guilty by reason of insanity.
What a defendant or their attorney would have to prove if he went down that road would be that the person had a mental disease or defect, and that at the time or commission of that crime, they could not understand or appreciate their actions or the morality or legality of their actions.
After the court hearing, his now former attorney, Alan Jackson, had a short press conference. Let's take a listen.
I had to withdraw as Nick Reiner's counsel. Circumstances beyond our control, but more importantly, circumstances beyond Nick's control, have dictated that sadly it's made it impossible for us to continue our representation of Nick. I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. And you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
All right, so a couple of things stood out to me here. First was Alan Jackson seems very impassioned. It seems like he really did want to continue on defending Nick. Now, I'm not a lawyer. We're gonna get into and look at another lawyer's commentary in just a second. But two main things that stood out to me. One was finances, in terms of Nick no longer had funds to continue to pay Alan Jackson. Although he doesn't have this published anywhere, but there is a lot of speculation in terms of his hourly pay rate, which can range from 1 to 2,000, even more per hour. So we do also know that Nick had a trust. We don't know if those assets or funds were frozen. There is also in California, but this would be down the road. It's called the Slayer rule, the Slayer law, but that is only after someone would be convicted of murdering a person. So basically, if you're convicted of murdering somebody, you can't inherit from them. But in this case, that wouldn't apply. So that was the first thing that came to mind. The other thing was a possible conflict of interest. Now, I don't know too much about that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but we're going to take a look at some more analysis in just a second. I do also want to say, even the phrasing that Alan Jackson was using in regards to Nick being not guilty, he didn't use any words like he's innocent. He's using terminology in pursuant with California law. Nick is not guilty, which would back or support TMZ's reporting that most likely Nick is going to enter an insanity plea. And so to me, this is a really big indicator that he's already gone through in these last 3 weeks a slew of psychiatric exams. So most likely there's going to be a slew of different assessments, psychiatric assessments, mental health assessments presented to the court. And as I stated before in my previous videos, there's going to be his own therapist and psychiatrist being subpoenaed. So we're going to get a lot more information in support of an insanity plea. Let's take a look at Peter over at Lawyer You Know's analysis as to why Alan Jackson withdrew from the case.
We have no objection. We, meaning me, on behalf of Nick Reiner, have no objection. He is making this statement. Seemingly, I don't know if something happened because of how the video's cut up, but seemingly he is making this statement right before he withdraws from the case. And it seems like, based on conversations had in chambers, everybody knew the withdrawal was coming and that it was going from him to the public defender's office, which to me reinforces, if I'm reading between the lines, what I think is going on in the background, which I'll share with you right after we're done with this hearing. You keep saying, we will do this. I mean, counsel for Nick Reiner. We will do, counsel for Nick Reiner, which again does not sound like a conflict. And maybe he'll even still help and, be there with the public defender. I don't know. But strange verbiage throughout. So after he handled those issues on behalf of Nick Reiner, after he made arguments on behalf of Nick Reiner, after he did his job as an attorney, protecting till the very end, fighting for his client, which is exactly what he should do, but not something you can do if you're conflicted off. So he just did all that, and now he's going to withdraw. So the judge already knew this. And the judge, because of the explanation that happened in chambers, the judge already knew this was happening and still allowed him to argue for, fight for, and represent Nick Reiner up until this point at this hearing. Like, when you're conflicted off, you can't even refer a client to another lawyer. You can't have anything to do with that case if there's an actual and unwaivable conflict, or a conflict that has not been waived.
All right. So Peter is saying here that if a lawyer has a conflict of interest, they wouldn't even be allowed to argue on behalf of their client at any point during the hearing, even making a referral to the public defender. So that is really interesting, which can indicate most likely it may not be a conflict of interest. Later on, I think he also brings up the possibility of Alan Jackson representing a witness, which could be a conflict of interest. But again, it's so early. There's no way to know at this point. And then I want to just take a look at one more thing that Peter brings up with the wording and the phrasing that Alan Jackson is using during that mini press conference.
Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. Very weird. I'll just tell you, very weird. People are saying you missed the previous bid. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. This is what somebody sent me. And this is kind of a weird and cryptic statement where he is committed to still being involved or helping Nick Reiner, but he can't. So he is kind of mentioning a conflict, but if it's a conflict, you can't work on it. You can't be involved. So he's taking a step back. It just all feels very cryptic to me. And I'll just tell you, okay? Behind chambers, behind closed doors, money issues and things that come out and make it impossible to go forward, you don't come out and say that, okay? You don't come out and say that in a press conference like this. I've almost never heard a lawyer come out and say that, whether or not it is the real issue. Okay, let's keep listening. What if he represents a witness? That could very well be the case. Could absolutely very well be the case. That's a good point. That's a good possibility. Is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Okay, so Alan Jackson doing only as Alan Jackson can. The way he said that to me could not have been louder and clearer that there is an insanity element to this. He is not guilty under California law. Not, he didn't do this. He didn't do this horrible act. He didn't, touch his parents. It wasn't him. Very different than
Under the laws of California, he is not guilty.
All right, so that's interesting to get Peter's take on the verbiage that Alan Jackson was using there. So, as the correspondent from Extra was reporting earlier, Nick's siblings, Romy and Jake, were not in attendance of the court hearing. This may be an indicator of a rift or a split in the family in terms of support. Again, initially, they came out with a statement in December saying that basically saying that, asking for privacy and that they do support their brother. But now, given their absence, as well as Nick's attorney, Alan Jackson, withdrawing from the case, indicating that most likely there was a lack of funds or Nick was not able to pay Alan's fees. Now, I did mention earlier that TMZ is coming out with a report this week on the last month or the month prior to Robin Michelle's murder and possible insight into why there was a medication change. And there's also news in terms of an update on Nick's diagnosis.
Have you had a chance to talk to Alan Jackson at all and find out what's behind this move?
I think what's behind the move is a very complex issue with this family. That they have lost their parents in a brutal way at the hands of their flesh and blood. So, again, when you think about them saying what we want is justice, they never define justice. And frankly, Ashley, from what I'm hearing, that's not an easy thing for them to define. They want justice for their parents, but there's also something big that is going on with Nick in terms of mental health. It is why Alan Jackson got in front of the cameras after he withdrew today, or on Wednesday, and said that Nick Reiner will be found not guilty of murder. He is saying that not because he's arguing that the Reiners did not die at the hands of Nick. He's saying it because where this case has been going, Ashley, is not guilty by reason of insanity. And that's where this case is heading. And it has to do with mental health. And it has to do with allegations that the mental health system has shockingly failed Rob, Michelle, and Nick Reiner.
Well, I know that your special that's coming out on Friday, TMZ investigates the Reiner murders, what really happened. You've uncovered some critical evidence, I think, to the very point you're making right now, and that is not guilty to some people doesn't incorporate the not guilty by reason of insanity. Doesn't mean you didn't commit the crime. It just means you're not mentally capable of being guilty by reason of law. So can you share anything or at least tell us a little bit about what you've uncovered in the special?
I can be specific. So a month before the murders, Nick was on antipsychotic meds. Nick had been diagnosed around 2020 with a form of schizophrenia. We know this. It is called schizoaffective disorder. It is a severe form of schizophrenia that not only involves psychosis, delusions, but also involves severe mood disorders. And when you combine the two, it becomes volcanic. So Nick had been on antipsychotic meds for several years. And a month before the murders, what we are being told is those meds were working. They were working fine. For some reason, his doctors changed the meds and it sent him into orbit. He became delusional. He became dangerous. The Reiners saw it. They were alarmed. It built and built and built the month before the murders. And it all revolved around a change in the meds. Now, what I am told, Ashley, I'm going to tell you what I know and what I don't know. What I'm told is that that there was absolutely no justification to change the meds. And the reason it was changed, I am told, would shock you, would absolutely shock you. And that you can't even look at logic to understand it. As to what it is specifically, my sources will not say. But they know something about the change in these meds. And I have confirmed this with others too, that the meds did change and he just went off the rails. And so there is something about that change that directly connects to Nick's state the night of those murders.
So let's start out with the last thing that Harvey's bringing up in regards to the medication change. So, new information that TMZ is reporting is that this schizophrenia disorder goes all the way back to 2020, which would mean Nick was 27 when he was diagnosed with not schizophrenia, but schizoaffective disorder, which we're going to take a look at the criteria for that diagnosis in just a second. But I want to comment on the change of medication and possibilities in regards to why that would happen. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, but in my consultation with psychiatrists and also hearing from my clients as well, there's a couple of things that come up. Number one, most common is insurance changes, and the medication that they're prescribed. There's an increase in copay that the client can't afford. Now, Nick being so well off, I highly doubt that this would have been a financial constraint for him. Another big issue that comes up, believe it or not, is supply shortage. I've definitely heard of clients being prescribed a certain medication and they just cannot find it in any pharmacy within 100 miles that it has that they're able to refill or even fill that prescription. So what can happen is a psychiatrist can make a decision to prescribe a similar medication in the same class in the interim while the client is waiting for that other medication to be filled, for that supply to come in to their local area. Because, it doesn't make sense if you're on a medication. I'm telling you in my own experience of speaking with psychiatrists and also working with my clients. If a medication works, you're not just changing it out of nowhere. There's no way that would happen. Either it would be most likely because of a financial burden or constraint on the client, or there's a supply shortage. And as Harvey's mentioning here, he's saying it basically bogs the mind. There's no rationale surrounding it. I mean, this is California. This is the US. And I think a lot of people would be pretty shocked in regards to supply shortages with psychotropic medications, but it does happen. So I did also want to share with you guys the criteria for schizoaffective disorder, just so you can get a clearer picture as to what that looks like. And so here we're using the DSM-5. So this is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is basically like the Bible for clinicians. This is how we diagnose. We go over this criteria. There's other measures as well and other assessments as well, but this is like the holy grail. This is our Bible. Okay, so let's scroll down because there is a spectrum of schizophrenia. Okay, so let's scroll down here to schizoaffective disorder. So what you see, column on the left, is criteria that was in the previous version of the DSM-4, And then the right column would be any changes in the DSM-5. And as we see, there was no changes from the DSM-4 to 5. So let's go down this list. Criteria A, an uninterrupted period of illness during which at some time there is either a major depressive episode, a manic episode, or a mixed episode concurrent with symptoms that meet criterion A for schizophrenia. So let's scroll back up to criteria A. So under schizophrenia, we're looking at characteristic symptoms, two or more of the following, each present for a significant portion of time during a 1 month period, or less if successfully treated. Delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, frequent derailment or incoherence, grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. So, being in a catatonic state is where you can shift from being very, I want to say almost comatose, like you're very zoned out, you're not speaking, you're just totally not present, to being in a very agitated state, doing repetitive motions like rocking back and forth or repeating words. And also negative symptoms, which includes affective flattening, alogia, or avolition. So, affective flattening basically just means a flat affect. So, minimal, pretty much no facial expression, just looking very, very flat. So, basically, like this. That would be an effective flattening. And alogia is lack of words. So, having difficulty finding words to communicate, short, brief answers. No, yeah, uh huh, okay. Or avolition, which has to do with motivation to do things, especially with regards to personal hygiene. So again, in order for Nick to meet criteria for schizoaffective disorder, he would have to have at least two of these present for at least a 1 month period. So let's scroll back down. Oh, wait, where did we go? Oh, here it is. So, continuing on, during the same period of illness, there may have been delusions or hallucinations for at least 2 weeks in the absence of prominent mood symptoms. So, what that means is there can be a period of 2 weeks, so half of the 1 month period, where there's an increase of delusions or hallucinations in place of mood symptoms. So, what mood symptoms mean is looking at major depressive and manic or mixed, which is basically code for bipolar. It can be bipolar 2, but with bipolar 1, you only need to be hospitalized for inpatient treatment once, and you're diagnosed as a bipolar 1. So basically, that's what that means, is the delusions and hallucinations can take take place or intensify when these mood symptoms are not present. Symptoms that meet criteria for a mood disorder are present for a substantial portion of the total duration of the active and residual periods of the illness. So basically, what this means is the major depressive, manic, i.e., bipolar symptoms are very much actively present in concurrence with the schizophrenia symptoms, as well as when those symptoms decrease. Lastly, the disturbance is not due to the direct physiological effects of a substance, a drug of abuse, a medication, or a general medical condition. So, I did talk about this in one of my previous videos, questioning, was Nick actually ever sober? We do see him even during that time period, 2016 to 2019, where he is claiming to be sober. He is still using marijuana. So basically, in order to meet schizoaffective criteria, he would have to have the symptoms we talked about present, separate from any other type of substance. Now, TMZ is reporting schizoaffective diagnosis was given in 2020. Okay. So this is right after that time period of where he was recording videos of himself and posting them of mood disturbances, as well as using, there was a white substance. We can't say that that was him exactly using because there's no face shown, but he is seen smoking weed. So this aspect is more challenging in regards to assessment, because if he hasn't had a significant period of sobriety, so how can you really tell what is affecting his mood? And, he did speak about using heroin. We don't know what was going on in regards to his relapse. However, we do know that he was continuing to use substances. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I'm going to continue following this case and share any updates that I have. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and share with someone who you feel like would find this information interesting or beneficial. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.